This narrative is titled, I Gave My Parents a Lavish One-Week Trip to Spain, but they chose to go with my unemployed sister instead of me. When I picked them up to go to the airport, they told me they had decided to take my sister with them. My mother smiled and said, "Your sister really needed a break, so we thought it would be good to take her." I didn't respond, but they were in for a big surprise when they landed in Spain. Hello, everyone! Before we jump into the story, a quick request. If you enjoy content like this, please hit the subscribe button. It's free, supports the channel, and ensures you never miss out on fantastic videos. Now, let's get started. So, here's the background. My family and I had gone through a lot this past year. My sister Carmen had a rough divorce that left her emotionally devastated. And when I say rough, I mean a full-blown disaster, with arguments over money, her ex trying to take the dog, and late-night crying fits that woke up the entire neighborhood. It was a nightmare. Carmen fell apart, and my parents and I had to step in to help. My mom, Anna, was running around doing everything for Carmen, helping her move out, dealing with lawyers, and even cooking meals on nights when Carmen was too fragile to do so. My dad, Javier, tried to remain calm, but you could see the toll it was taking on him. He looked 10 years older within just a few months. As for me, I did everything I could to assist, despite having my own responsibilities. I work full-time and have my own bills, but I still helped out with things like Carmen's groceries when she couldn't afford them, which happened frequently. I even gave her my old car after hers broke down, because she couldn't bear the stress of buying a new one. We all shared the burden because, well, that's what families do, right? Fast forward to earlier this year, things started to calm down a bit. Carmen moved into a new apartment, and my parents no longer had to worry about her constantly. I wanted to do something nice for them as a way to thank them for all they'd done, not just for me, but also for Carmen. So, I began planning. I had been saving money for years, setting aside a little from each paycheck. Initially, I thought I might use it for a down payment on a house or a big trip for myself one day, but then I realized, why not use it for something special right now? My parents had been through so much stress and truly needed a break, so I decided to plan a trip to Spain for the three of us. Why Spain? My mom had always dreamed of visiting Barcelona to see the Sagrada Familia, as she's obsessed with architecture. It had been her dream for as long as I could remember. My dad, on the other hand, is a huge foodie, so I thought he'd enjoy the tapas and paella. Plus, Spain offers everything: beaches, history, and culture. It just seemed perfect. I went all out. I spent hours researching the best flights, hotels, and tours, making sure we had plenty of time to relax with free days to explore or just enjoy each other's company. The whole trip ended up costing far more than I was comfortable admitting, but I didn't care. It wasn't about the cost. It was about making memories with my parents. I envisioned us strolling through cobblestone streets, eating churros dipped in chocolate. Finally, the day of the trip arrived. I woke up early to pick them up and drive them to the airport. I was so excited I barely slept the night before. I pulled into their driveway exactly on time, or so I thought. As soon as my mom stepped onto the porch, she said, "You're late." I glanced at the clock on my dashboard. 7:03 a.m. "Mom, I'm only 3 minutes late." I tried to laugh it off, but she gave me that look. I got out of the car to help with their luggage, and as my dad came out with his suitcase, I was about to grab it when the door opened again. That's when I saw Carmen dragging her suitcase behind her. I froze. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice already tight. My mom, smiling too widely, looked at me and said, "Oh, Valeria, we decided Carmen should come instead of you. She's been through so much lately, and she really needs this trip." "Instead of me?" My heart started pounding, but I tried to stay calm. "Mom, I've been planning this for so long. I paid for everything. She waved me off like I had said something ridiculous. We're so grateful, sweetheart. But you work so hard. You can take another trip later. Carmen needs this right now. Carmen didn't even seem guilty. She just smirked and said, "Thanks for understanding, Val. This means a lot to me." I turned to my dad, hoping he'd back me up, but he avoided my gaze and handed me his suitcase like it was no big deal. I couldn't believe this was happening. What could I do? I wasn't about to cause a scene right there in the driveway. So, I swallowed my frustration, clenched my jaw, and forced a smile. "Let's get going then," I said flatly. The drive to the airport was awkward. It wasn't just the silence, it was the tension in the air, like everyone knew something was wrong, but no one wanted to address it. Well, not everyone. Carmen seemed completely oblivious, sitting in the back seat, chatting as if everything was normal. "Oh my gosh, Mom," she said, leaning forward. "Did you see that thing on TikTok about the shopping streets in Madrid? I have to go there. And do you think we'll have time for a day trip to Toledo? I read that it's so cute and historical." I didn't even look at the rearview mirror. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my fingers started to cramp. How could she be so casual about this? Did she really not understand how messed up it was that she was going instead of me? My mom chuckled, like everything was fine. "Don't worry, Carmen. We'll have time for everything. And even if we don't, we'll be back someday. Right, Javier?" My dad, sitting silently in the passenger seat, gave a half-hearted "mm-hmm," as if he didn't want to get involved. Smart move, but also frustrating. He hadn't said a word to me since we left the house. It was like he couldn't even look at me. I couldn't stay quiet any longer. "Just to be clear," I said flatly, "this is officially her trip now." The car fell silent for a moment. Then Carmen, as clueless as ever, said, "Don't be so dramatic, Val. I mean, you'll get your turn eventually, right?" "Eventually?" I repeated, my grip tightening on the wheel. I had to force myself to breathe before I snapped. "Sure, Carmen. Whenever that happens, let me know." My mom turned to me with a sugary tone. "Valeria, please don't ruin this for Carmen. She's had such a tough year. You know how hard the divorce was for her." There it was, the excuse for everything that had happened this past year. Carmen's divorce. It was like a golden card she could pull out whenever she needed something. Need groceries, but don't want to pay? Divorce card? Don't feel like handling responsibilities? Divorce card. Now, it was the "Let's steal Valeria's trip to Spain" card. I bit the inside of my cheek so hard it hurt, but I didn't say another word. What was the point? They had already made up their minds. They always did. Carmen needed this. Carmen deserved this. It had always been the same. If you asked them, I was the strong one, the one who could handle anything. Carmen was the fragile one, the one who needed protection. From what? I never really understood. I kept quiet for the rest of the drive, while Carmen rambled on about all the things she wanted to do in Spain, throwing out random facts she had probably Googled 5 minutes before we left. "Oh, Mom, did you know the Sagrada Familia is still under construction? Isn't that crazy?" Mom humored her with a polite, "Oh, wow," but I could tell she wasn't really paying attention. Neither was I. I was too busy staring at the road, wishing I could just turn the car around and go home. Or better yet, drop them off and leave them stranded on the curb. But I couldn't do that, because I'm the responsible one. The closer we got to the airport, the heavier the silence became. My dad didn't say a word, which wasn't like him. Normally, he'd crack some dumb joke to lighten the mood, or at least try to smooth things over. Not this time. He just fiddled with his phone as though it were the most fascinating thing in the world. I could feel the tension radiating off him. but he did nothing to ease it. I guess he thought it was easier to stay quiet and let Mom handle things. Typical. When we arrived at the drop-off zone, I parked and got out to help with their bags. Carmen jumped out first, practically. Carmen hopped out first, eagerly grabbing her suitcase from the trunk. Mom followed, thanking me for driving them as though she hadn't just replaced me on my own trip. Dad continued to avoid eye contact, muttering a quiet, "Thanks, Valeria," as he handed me his suitcase. Mom came over and gave me a hug, which I barely reciprocated. "Thank you for understanding, sweetheart," she said. "This means so much to us." "Sure, Mom," I responded in a completely flat tone, not even attempting to hide my anger. Why bother? They clearly didn't care about my feelings, so why should I? Carmen, of course, had to throw in one last remark before leaving. "Thanks, Val. You're the best," she said, grinning as though this was all some big joke. I stood there on the curb, watching them walk into the terminal, waiting until they were out of sight before returning to the car. I gripped the steering wheel and stared straight ahead. My chest felt tight, and my stomach was in knots. This wasn't just about the trip. It was about everything. All the times I had put their needs before mine, only to receive nothing in return. This trip was supposed to be a way for us to bond, to show them how much I appreciated all they had done for me. And what did I get? A slap in the face. The drive home felt like a blur. I couldn't stop replaying everything in my mind. The smirk on Carmen's face, Mom's dismissive attitude, Dad's silence. It all felt so unfair. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the anger had taken over completely. I sat in the car for a few minutes, gripping the wheel so tightly that my fingers ached. Finally, I got out, slammed the door, and marched into the house. I didn't even bother to take off my shoes. As I sat down, my hands were still shaking, not from nerves or sadness, but from pure, unfiltered anger. The kind of anger that bubbles up from your chest and pounds in your head. The kind where you know if you don't do something, you're going to explode. I opened my laptop, pulled up my email, and stared at the screen for a moment. The itinerary for the trip was right there in my inbox, taunting me like a cruel joke. Flights, hotels, tours, everything I had meticulously planned and paid for. Now, all for a trip I wasn't even invited to anymore. I clicked on the hotel confirmation first, the boutique hotel in Madrid. I had chosen it because of its charm, intimate atmosphere, and rave reviews about the service and location. It was supposed to be a place where we could unwind after long days of sightseeing and just enjoy each other's company. But that was just for Carmen now, not for me. "Not anymore," I muttered under my breath as I clicked through the cancellation process. It only took a few moments. When the cancellation confirmation popped up in my inbox, I felt a small sense of satisfaction. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Next was the villa in Seville. This one stung more because I had splurged on it. It had a private pool, a huge terrace, and was right near the old town. It was probably the nicest place I had ever booked, and I had been so excited about it. I imagined us sitting by the pool, laughing and sharing stories, finally feeling like a family again after everything we'd been through. Except now, it would just be Carmen sitting there, sipping iced tea and living her best life. "Yeah, no," I told myself as I clicked through to cancel the reservation. The confirmation came through almost instantly. Another one down. The tours were next. I had booked 2 private tours because I wanted us to have a more intimate experience, to really connect with the places we were visiting without the hassle of a big tourist group. But now, they could wander around aimlessly for all I cared. I clicked through the cancellation process. Refund done. I leaned back in my chair for a moment, letting the weight of the cancellations sink in. It felt good. Really good. Not just because I was getting my money back, although that was a bonus, but because it felt like I was taking control of something that had been completely taken from me. Then, I remembered the flights. I logged into the airline's website, knowing the flights were probably the most expensive part of the trip. I had upgraded myself and my parents to business class, something special for them after all the stress they had been through. But now, the thought of Carmen reclining in a comfy seat, sipping orange juice, made my blood boil. I couldn't cancel their flights entirely. They had already checked in. But I could downgrade them back to economy. And so, I did. I clicked through the options, feeling guilty for just half a second. But then I remembered Carmen's smug look when she said, "Thanks for understanding, Val," and the guilt vanished. Downgrade confirmed. I leaned back again, staring at the screen. There was one last thing to handle: the return flight. I clicked on the details and hovered over the cancel button for a moment. Should I really go this far? Would they be stranded in Spain? Completely helpless? Then I remembered who I was dealing with. My parents weren't helpless. They would figure it out, just like they had figured out how to replace me on this trip. "Good luck with that, Carmen," I muttered as I clicked the button to cancel. Confirmation. Done. The email confirmation popped up and I stared at it for a long time. I felt lighter. It was like some of the weight that had been pressing down on me all day had finally lifted. I closed the laptop and stood up, stretching my arms. My chest didn't feel so tight anymore, but the anger wasn't gone. Not yet. I walked into the kitchen, grabbed a glass of water, and sipped it slowly as I thought about what I had just done. Part of me still felt guilty, like maybe I had gone too far. But then I reminded myself why I had done it. I hadn't gone too far. If anything, I had done exactly what I needed to do. By the time I finished my water, I felt calmer. I grabbed my phone and checked my emails again to make sure everything was in order. They were still going to Spain, but they weren't going to have the luxury vacation I had planned for them. They'd have to figure it out on their own now. And honestly, that felt like justice. I left my laptop on the kitchen table and went to my room, grabbing a book from my nightstand. I wasn't in the mood to read, but I needed something to distract me. Anything to take my mind off the day. As I lay there, flipping through the pages without really reading them, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. For once, I hadn't just rolled over and let them walk all over me. I had stood up for myself, even if it was in a quiet, behind-the-scenes way. They might not know it yet, but they were about to learn a very important lesson. You don't mess with someone who's been holding everything together for you. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I had actually done something for myself. And that, I realized, was worth more than any trip to Spain. The calls began before I had even finished unpacking. I was in my room, methodically putting away the clothes I had packed for a trip. I wasn't taking any more when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I ignored it at first. Then it buzzed again, and again. I sighed, picked it up, and saw a flood of notifications, missed calls, voicemails, texts, every single one from my mom. Of course, I scrolled through the messages, each one sounding more frantic than the last. "Anna, Valeria, we can't check into the hotel. They don't have our reservation. Call me right now. Anna, this isn't funny. Fix this now. Anna, what's going on? The front desk says we have no tours booked either." I smirked. Yeah, they were starting to figure it out. I put the phone down and went back to unpacking. It was almost funny how quickly they'd gone from, "Thank you, Val, you're the best," to "fix this now." What did they think would happen? That I would just sit back and fund their dream vacation after they decided I wasn't good enough to join? The buzzing continued as I hung my dresses in the closet and placed my shoes back on the shelf. It filled the room like an annoying mosquito that wouldn't leave me alone. By the time I finished unpacking, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my phone and answered the next call. "Valeria!" Mom's voice came through sharp and loud, like she'd been waiting for me to pick up for hours. "What did you do?" "The hotel says the reservation was canceled, and none of the tours are booked anymore." "I canceled them," I replied flatly. There was a long pause. I could almost picture her standing in the hotel lobby, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. "Why would you do that?" she finally hissed. "Oh, I don't know," I said, leaning back in my chair. "Chair. Maybe because you chose to exclude me from the trip." "You're lucky I even drove you to the airport," I replied coldly. "We thought you'd understand," she said, her tone now tinged with guilt. "Carmen needed this, and you didn't." I snapped, "I've been helping you support her all year, paid for everything, and when I finally do something for myself, you kick me out. No, Mom, I don't understand." Her voice sharpened. "Valeria, we don't do this to each other." "Funny," I said. "I was just thinking the same thing." Before she could respond, Carmen's voice rang out in the background. "Mom, just hang up on her. She's being ridiculous." That was the breaking point. "You know what?" I said, my voice cold as ice. "You wanted Carmen on this trip so badly, so now you can enjoy it with her. Don't call me again to fix your mess. Goodbye." I ended the call and powered off my phone. The silence was blissful. The next morning, curiosity got the best of me, and I turned my phone back on. Predictably, there were more texts and voicemails. The first ones were from Mom, furious. "Anna, this is childish. Valeria, you've humiliated us. We don't deserve this." Then the messages began to soften. "Anna, please just fix this. We're your parents." Even Dad chimed in, which surprised me. He usually stayed out of these things. "Javier, Valeria, this isn't like you. Let's talk." And, of course, Carmen had to add her own thoughts. "Carmen, just fix it already." I rolled my eyes and set the phone down. If they thought guilt-tripping me would work, they clearly didn't know me as well as they thought. By the third day, their frustration seemed to boil over, and the texts became even more dramatic. "Anna, Valeria, you need to call me back right now. The hotel we found is awful, and the tours we tried to book are all sold out. Carmen, thanks for nothing, Val." I wasn't sure if I should laugh or feel annoyed. They were really struggling without me. It almost felt satisfying to see how quickly things fell apart when I wasn't around to pick up the pieces. Eventually, I gave in to curiosity and answered when Dad called. "Valeria," he started, his tone heavier than usual. "Your mom wanted me to talk to you." "Of course she did," I replied. "She's probably still mad that I didn't fix everything for her." He sighed. "Look, this has gotten out of hand. Your mom's upset, Carmen's furious, and this whole trip is, well, it's a mess." "Sounds about right," I said, not bothering to hide my satisfaction. "But you're better than this," he continued, trying to flatter me. "You've always been the reasonable one, the one who keeps everything together." That struck a nerve. "You're right," I said. "I am the one who keeps everything together, and I'm tired of it." "Valeria, this isn't just about the trip," he said, trying to remain calm. "We're family. We should work through this together." "Family?" I echoed, my voice rising. "Is that what we're calling this? Because to me, it feels like I'm just the backup whenever Carmen screws up." There was a long silence. Finally, he said, "I don't know what you want me to say." "I don't need you to say anything," I replied. "I need you to understand that I'm done. You made your choice when you decided I wasn't important enough to be part of this trip. Now you can live with it." I hung up before he could respond and turned off my phone again. By the time I turned my phone back on, I had enjoyed a few days of blissful silence, but something nagged at me. I knew they hadn't let it go. As soon as the phone powered up, the notifications flooded in like a burst of water. It seemed they thought spamming me would make me cave. I scrolled through the messages, almost impressed by how many emotions they packed into their frantic texts. Anna. Valeria, this is getting out of hand. We need to talk. Carmen. Seriously, Val, you're so petty. Mom is losing her mind, and it's your fault. Anna continued, the second hotel we found is awful. We can't even figure out the air conditioning, and it's so loud here. How could you do this to us? Now that I had stepped back for once, they were completely losing their minds. I opened a voicemail from Mom, expecting at least some entertainment. Her voice came through, sharp and angry. Valeria, I don't know what you think you're doing, but this is unacceptable. We're stranded here trying to salvage this trip, and you've made it impossible. Carmen is devastated, and your father and I... She paused, her tone softening, probably hoping to guilt-trip me. We're so disappointed in you. This isn't who you are. Call me back so we can sort this out. I laughed out loud. This isn't who you are? The irony of that statement hit me like a brick. Who I was, apparently, was the one who always put them first, who made sure everything ran smoothly no matter the emotional, financial, or personal cost. Well, not anymore. Over the next couple of days, the texts kept coming, but they started to change. Instead of just angry rants, there were hints of desperation. Javier, we just want to understand why you're so angry. That almost made me laugh. Why I'm so angry, I thought. After everything they had done, they still didn't get it. But I wasn't going to explain it to them again. They could figure it out themselves. Meanwhile, I spent my days enjoying the peace and quiet, without their constant demands hanging over me. I finally had time to focus on myself. Of course, the peace didn't last. On the fourth day, Mom called again, and for some reason, I answered. Maybe I was bored, or maybe I just wanted to see what excuse she would come up with this time. Valeria, she barked as soon as I picked up. This isn't funny anymore. We're struggling here. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is? We're in this horrible hotel, and we don't know how to get anywhere because the tours you canceled were supposed to include transportation. So, you're mad because you have to plan things for yourselves? I asked, my tone completely flat. Acting like a child, she snapped. And you're acting like I owe you something, I shot back. Guess what, Mom? I don't. That's it, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Enjoy the trip. Oh, wait, you can't, because you're completely unprepared. Not my problem. Goodbye. If they wanted to act like I didn't matter, then they could figure out how to survive in Spain without me. By the time their flight back home was due, I had fully settled into my quiet, stress-free routine. My phone stayed off most of the time. I only turned it on once or twice to check for work. Friends or bills. Things that mattered. The endless stream of texts and voicemails from my parents and Carmen didn't qualify as important, so I ignored them. I'd gotten used to the silence, and it was peaceful, but the day their flight was scheduled to land, I figured they would come straight to me. I wasn't going to hide. If they wanted to throw their tantrums in person, they were welcome to try. Sure enough, about an hour after their plane landed, a taxi pulled into the driveway, and I saw them climbing out, dragging their bags behind them. I was already there, parked in their driveway, sipping coffee on the porch swing, like I didn't have a care in the world. They spotted me as soon as they got out of the car. Mom looked exhausted but still managed to look annoyed, and Dad? Well, he just looked like he wanted to disappear. Carmen was the first to speak. Well, I hope you're happy, Val. You completely ruined the trip. I raised an eyebrow but didn't bother standing up. Did I? Or did you ruin it when you decided to kick me off the guest list? Mom's jaw tightened, and she threw up her hands as if this was somehow my fault. You know what you did, Valeria. Canceling everything was spiteful and childish. We couldn't even find decent hotels after that, let alone tours. It was a nightmare. "Oh, no," I said, feigning concern as I took another sip of coffee. "A nightmare, you say? What happened? Did Carmen not get her Instagram-worthy photos?" Carmen groaned. "You're so petty." "It's not about Instagram," she said. "Isn't it, though?" I shot back. "Because from where I'm sitting, it sure looked like this trip was all about that." "Was all about you," Dad intervened, his voice quieter but still firm. "Valeria, you didn't have to cancel everything. You could have just let it go and joined us on the next trip." That got me to my feet. I set my mug down on the little table next to the swing and folded my arms. "The next trip? Really? You think I'm just going to brush this off and plan another trip for the three of us? Or will Carmen magically need that one more than me, too?" My voice was steady. "You always think Carmen needs more attention, more support, more help. And I'm always the one who has to sacrifice so she can have it. Not this time." Carmen crossed her arms and scoffed. "Wow, Val, get over yourself. You're acting like this trip was some huge gift when really, it's just money. You'll make more." I stared at her, my jaw tightening. "Do you even hear yourself? Do you know how much work and sacrifice went into planning that trip? How many things I gave up to make it special for Mom and Dad? And you just waltz in at the last minute and take it like it's owed to you. You're unbelievable." "We didn't mean to make you feel like that," Dad said, his voice weak. "But you did," I replied, holding his gaze. "And now you're upset because I didn't just roll over and take it. You're mad because I finally said, 'Enough is enough.'" Mom's face softened slightly, and for a moment I thought she might actually apologize. But instead she said, "We just thought you'd understand, Valeria. You're so strong, and Carmen isn't." I finished her sentence. "Yeah, I got the memo. I've been hearing it my whole life. Guess what, Mom? Being strong doesn't mean I don't have feelings, and it doesn't mean I'm okay with being treated like I don't matter." There was silence for a moment. I could see Mom thinking things over. Carmen looked like she wanted to say something snarky, but for once she kept her mouth shut. Finally, Dad broke the silence. "We're sorry, Valeria. We didn't think about how much this would hurt you." I raised an eyebrow. "No, you didn't. And that's the problem. You never think about me. You just assume I'll keep holding everything together while you focus on Carmen. Well, not anymore. From now on, I'm putting myself first." Mom's lips tightened, but she didn't argue. I could tell she wanted to, but she didn't have a leg to stand on. "Good," I said, picking up my bag from the swing. "I'm glad you're back safe, but don't expect things to go back to the way they were. I'm done being your doormat." I walked to my car, ignoring their calls for me to stop. As I pulled out of the driveway, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Mom looked stunned, Dad looked defeated, and Carmen just looked pissed. A few weeks after the blow-up with my parents and Carmen, I booked a solo trip to Spain. The idea came to me one night while scrolling through Instagram. Ironically, Carmen had posted some half-decent pictures from their trip. Grainy selfies in front of the Sagrada Familia, an awkward group photo by the Alhambra. It looked like they had managed to patch together something resembling a vacation after I'd canceled everything, but it was nowhere near what I had planned. That thought didn't make me feel guilty. It made me realize something. I didn't need to tie my happiness to theirs anymore. Why should I miss out on Spain just because they ruined my first plan? I had the money back from all the canceled bookings, and the idea of going on my own started to feel freeing. No schedules to accommodate, no family drama, no compromises, just me doing what I wanted when I wanted. When I flew back home, I felt lighter. My parents had texted me a couple of times while I was gone, and I skimmed through their messages. Mom was trying to sound apologetic, but it still had that undertone of guilt-tripping. She was so good at it. "Anna, hope you're enjoying your trip. Maybe we can talk when you get back." I didn't reply right away. I wanted to, but on my terms. I'd made that mistake too many times before, rushing to smooth things over just to keep the peace. Not this time. A couple of weeks after I got back, I was feeling pretty good about how things were going. I had my life back in my hands, my boundaries were solid, and I'd made peace with the fact that I wasn't going to sacrifice for my family anymore. But of course, that peace didn't last long. My parents and Carmen just couldn't leave well enough alone. It started with the calls. At first, it was just the occasional checking in type of message. Mom would call and leave a voicemail like, "Hi, Valeria. Just wanted to see how you're doing. Give us a call when you can." Nice enough on the surface, but I could tell there was underlying tension. I ignored all of it, every text, every voicemail, every guilt trip. I wasn't ready to have another argument or, worse, pretend like everything was fine just to keep the peace. Then came the favors. It started with a message from Mom. "Anna, Valeria, your dad's car broke down and we're struggling to figure out how to cover the repairs. I know you're good with budgeting. Can you help us out?" I stared at the text, feeling the familiar pressure creep in. For years, I had been the one to help whenever something went wrong, whether it was household expenses or stepping in during their financial messes. I'd always been the fallback. Not this time. I replied with a simple, "Sorry to hear that. Maybe Carmen can pitch in." No response. A week later, Mom called again. This time, I decided to answer, just to see what they wanted. "Valeria," she began, her voice full of the fake sweetness she always used when trying to butter me up. "How are you, sweetheart? We haven't heard from you in so long." "I'm fine, Mom," I said, keeping my tone flat. "Good, good," she said quickly. "Listen, your dad and I were wondering if you could come over this weekend. The gutters need cleaning, and Javier's back has been bothering him lately. You're so good at that kind of thing." I almost laughed out loud. Now they wanted me to come clean their gutters? "I can't," I said. There was a pause. "Why not?" she asked, her tone sharpening. "Because it's not my responsibility," I replied. "Hire someone if you need help." She sputtered for a moment, clearly caught off guard. "That's not fair, Valeria. We've apologized already." "No, you haven't," I interrupted. "You've made excuses. You've tried to guilt me into forgiving you, but you've never actually apologized. And even if you did, it wouldn't change the fact that I'm done being your backup, Valeria." "I have to go," I said, and hung up before she could argue. The final straw came a few weeks later when Carmen sent me a text. "Hey, Val, I need a huge favor. My rent's due, and I'm short this month. Can you spot me $500? I'll pay you back ASAP." I stared at the message for a full minute, feeling the familiar anger rise. After everything, she still had the nerve to ask me for money like nothing had happened. I typed out a quick reply and sent it before I could second-guess myself. "No." Her response came almost immediately. "Carmen, seriously? After everything I've been through, you can't help me out? Wow, you're unbelievable." That was it. I was done. No more explanations, no more arguments, no more giving them the benefit of the doubt. The next morning, I sat down and wrote an email to my parents. It wasn't long or overly dramatic, just simple and to the point. "Hi, Mom and Dad. I've been thinking a lot about everything that's happened, and I've come to a decision. I need to step back from this family dynamic for my own well-being. For years, I've been the one to hold everything together, to sacrifice my own needs for the sake of keeping the peace, but I can't do it anymore. I need space to focus on myself and build the life I want, free from the constant pressure to fix everyone else's problems. This isn't a decision I've made lightly, but it's one I feel is necessary. I hope you'll respect my boundaries moving forward. Valeria. I hit send and blocked their numbers. In the weeks that followed, there were a few attempts to reach me. Emails from Dad, Facebook messages from Mom, even a friend of theirs reaching out on their behalf. I ignored all of it. It was hard at first, but as time went on, I realized how much lighter I felt without their constant demands and guilt weighing me down. For the first time in years, I was free to focus on myself without feeling like I owed anyone anything. Cutting ties wasn't easy, but it was the right decision. Some people might say I went too far, but honestly, I don't regret a thing. Sometimes, the best thing you can do for yourself is walk away. And that's exactly what I did.